afternoon, Maine. This is Chuck Ellis here, and I'm the host of the Muddy Waters podcast, which you're watching right now. As you all know, the Muddy Waters podcast exists to help the people of Maine better understand what's going on here in our state, as well as highlight, and I really do that while also highlighting different people from around the state who know what's going on and can share their own stories of what's happening in their world, so that we know what's really happening. Unfortunately, the mainstream media is not doing their job. And today, our guest is Shaun Hogan, who is a vet and a current school board candidate. If I'm not mistaken, you ran for other positions in the past as well.
That's correct. I had previously run for a school board position in Brunswick as well, and twice actually, 3 years ago, and then I ran this past November. And the person who defeated me before she even took office, she resigned. So it was a little interesting, but here we are again.
Maybe the voters will question themselves and wonder if they made the right choice. The person who keeps running is probably more worthy of it than the person who wins and then runs away or leaves. But life happens.
More dedicated.
Yeah, you're a little bit more dedicated. Yeah. So just wanted to had a lot of fun. It's the first time I've really, outside of my own campaign stuff, shot somebody else's campaign video. But before we get into that too much, which we're going to give everybody, some people have probably already seen it, but give you a preview of what we did. Or again, it's up online, so people have probably seen it. But either way, wanted to just kind of give you an opportunity to talk about who you are, Shaun, and why you're so interested in being on the school board in Brunswick. Why do you care, and why would you put yourself in that position? All of these things. Like who are you, and where do you come from, and why?
Yeah, no, well, thank you very much, Chuck, for the opportunity here. So really quick, I'm originally from away. I'm not a native Mainer. Grew up in Connecticut and ran away as soon as I could.
Good to see.
But the Navy is what ultimately brought me to Brunswick. I got stationed here in Brunswick, Maine back in 2006, and ultimately worked my way up to being the kennel supervisor on the base. I was canine handler, military police officer. And so I have a background actually originally in law enforcement, but I've been an educator going back at least 25 years. I went to school to teach high school social studies. I ultimately got my certification to teach high school social studies here in Maine. And in fact, I did my student teaching practicum at Brunswick High School, and I worked for the Brunswick School Department for a time as a substitute teacher. Ultimately, I found my way into teaching driver's education. I've been doing that for the last 10 years. And I would say a large majority of the Freeport young adults now, I taught how to drive, and a significant portion of the Maine young adults as well. I also have a pretty extensive background training adults. I volunteer here in town in Brunswick for Maine Paws for Veterans. I'm on the board of directors, but I got my start with them actually as a participant in the program. Maine Paws for Veterans, what the organization does is it'll pair a veteran who has a PTS, post-traumatic stress diagnosis, with a medical services dog, and then train the team to a certification standard. I started off as a participant, but as a former canine handler, I had a leg up and stayed on as a trainer, and now I'm on the board of directors. So a lot of training experience. Why am I subjecting myself to this? I firmly believe that when you have concerns, when you have problems, that if you're going to gripe about it. And I'm a pretty familiar face at town council or school board meetings where I'm complaining. I'm voicing my concerns about their budgeting priorities and what they're spending their money on, and whatever concerns. I have a deep, strong belief that if you're going to point out a problem, you best be willing to step forward and offer solutions. And that's why I've thrown my hat in the ring a few times, is because I'm saying here, hey, we've got some issues. A big part of my platform is that everybody on the school board here in Brunswick has a kid or has recently had a kid in the public schools. Not a single one of them. Who represents the senior citizens in this town? Who represents the parent that homeschools their student or who sends their kid to a private? It's crazy. I actually had somebody the other day in a back and forth exchange who said, if you don't send your child to the public schools, then you forfeit any say as to how that money is spent in the public school system. And I think that's just absolutely crazy that people have that belief. The parent of a homeschooled or private schooled child is still paying taxes that are getting spent by the school department. So of course
Well,
they have a say.
and more to the point, like what about like it's almost there is a lot of I would say insanity around that, right? I recently had Josh Tabor. He's also a school board member down inside. He is a school board member, I should say, down in Southern Maine. He's a teacher, and he's a former school administrator. His kids though go to school out of state. They live with their mom, and the reason is because Maine schools are not good, and so he'd rather have his kids, and so but like being on the school board, there's a lot of good reasons for somebody who doesn't have kids in the school district to be on the school board, right? And like you just like one is like you still pay taxes in the town, but two is maybe you want to send your kids to the public school and it's not where it needs to be, and so you want to help it get there, which will benefit everyone and hopefully maybe be able to benefit yourself. But like but yeah, I mean, this idea of like there's a bizarre idea, I think, that only people with kids in the school district should be on school board. And I think somebody who is like unaware of reality and hasn't really thought things through, it's easy to initially come to that conclusion, because I think a lot of people think that they're like, well, why would you be on the school board if you don't have kids in the school? And it's like, well, there are these reasons, right? Like the school is spending money like it's going out of style and nobody there is representing the people, and they're actually elected by the people. Yes, we want a good education for kids, but they're also to be the representation of the town. And so anyway, it's mind blowing in some sense that we need to explain this to people. But yeah, anyway. But what's
It's
interesting too is like as a man, like women know more about kids. So shouldn't men not be on the school board?
it's it's just the premise is so absurd. Um, you know, I have found that um, at the end of the day, be it a man or a woman, an educator is an educator, and if you're quality, it's going to show. One of the things I'm really proud about actually is with the driver ed school that I manage here in Brunswick, 4.9 stars on Google reviews. I must be doing something right. And this
Yeah.
is 10 years of teaching, thousands of students I've taught over the years, and I welcome everybody, and I've gotten really good feedback. Actually, what's really nice is when some of my students see that I'm running for school board, and they're like, hey, good on you. Well, former students, I guess now, because some of them I've been doing it for so long. Some of them are just grown up adults, have kids of their own even. But it is rewarding to hear that feedback. But kind of going back a little bit to what you had mentioned, 60 here in Brunswick, roughly 60% of our taxes are going directly to the school department. So that's a huge chunk of the taxes that an individual in Brunswick pays. And it's funny too, because when I was going door to door to get nominations to get on the ballot, I can't tell you how many people would say to me, well, I don't have a kid in the school, so I'm really not interested. And I'm like, but yeah, but you pay taxes. You should have some interest in this, because a big chunk of the tax money that you're spending is going into the school department. So, I actually listened to the podcast with Josh, and a part of what you guys were discussing was a return on your investment. The tax money that the residents pay in, you're making an investment in your community, and you want to see that money is spent well. And to another point that you made, I don't have children yet, right? But when I do, I want them going into a Brunswick school department that is running top notch. And my concern right now is that it's not. And so, yeah, I want to be part of my platform is I want to be a voice for all of Brunswick. And I've had people who don't agree with me say, well, you don't speak for me. Okay, but what I mean by all of Brunswick is all the people whose voices are not being heard, whose voices are not being represented by our current school board. And honestly, when you see your school board always voting unanimously the same way, and you don't see anybody ever raise an objection, hey, what about this? Should we consider that? That's a problem, because if you don't have a dissenting opinion, then there's no debate or conversation to be had. There's no weighing of the pros and cons of the decisions that are made. And that doesn't benefit the public at all, because I think the public wants to see that conversation, and it's not happening. And that's a problem.
Yeah. No, it's a huge problem. So outside of that, because you've mentioned a number of things that I think are reasons to run, like what are the main, obviously getting people who are not being represented, 60% of the taxes. And you also mentioned return on investment. So I would wonder if you could kind of talk about like, what are the main, issues that you want to address outside of, representing people who are currently not being representative, and maybe what do you mean by getting a good return on investment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd imagine what first got me interested in what's going on with our school department years ago was the way that the money was being spent. And so my very first campaign was all about fiscal responsibility and transparency, which I feel we lack here in Brunswick. Our spending priorities just seem a little bit out of whack. And for years, I've been asking the school department, when they put together their budget, to show me a line graph of, going back 10 years, how many students that we've had enrolled in the system. And here in Brunswick, it's relatively flat, versus how many teachers have been hired versus how many administrators have been hired, and also what the total budget. Here in Brunswick, going back 6 years, our budget has increased $17 million over 6 years. But the increase in total student enrollment has been, give or take, about 3% of an increase, if that. We are incredibly top heavy and bloated on our administration side, and they just keep adding more and more. At one point, we were up to 12 social workers in our school department. 12 social workers. Now,
What?
I get that some families might not have the insurance to send their kid to a social worker, but it's not the job of the school department to be the parent. It's the job of the parent to be the parent. And I want to see our school department focus on the things that schools should be focusing on: teaching science, teaching math, right? Teaching the kids how to read. Not some of these, I'll just say, for lack of a better definition, DEI initiatives that we see going on. And so that kind of brings me to another part of my platform is, ever since pretty much about 6 years ago, when the budget exploded and we got a new superintendent, DEI has been the framework through which the town of Brunswick school department makes every decision through that lens of DEI, and it's costing us millions and millions of dollars. And I personally, I think DEI is a very discriminatory framework. It picks winners and losers. And what I'd like to see us do is return to a merit-based system where we are looking at our decisions based on a person's merit, and their character. So who a person is, not what they are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we want people to be judged based on the content of the whole Martin Luther King Jr. Quote is like, he's longing for a day in which people will be judged based on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And we've just reversed. We've gone right back into it's reverse racism is racism. When you're prioritizing one race over another, that is racism. There's this idea by the insane left that the only form of racism is white on black, and it's just absolutely not true, as we see in South Africa right now. In which case the liberals here are like, good, they should get kicked out, they should go back to their country. Like, wait a second.
Unbelievable.
I feel like we were told that was racist when, I know when I heard relatives of mine, older, previous generations, making comments like that, I'm like, that's racist. Saying that, like, Africans should go back to Africa, for instance, is racist. Why then is it not racist to say that white people don't belong in South Africa and they need to go back to Europe?
Yeah.
I'm kind of feeling like that's racist. But
It's
anyway,
yeah,
this is
no, it's
Maine,
only
but
racist when it fits their narrative.
well, this is exactly it. And it's easy. It's nice to be able to have a narrative that constantly has you talking out of both sides of your mouth, because that way you can say whatever you want, whenever you want, as long as it's convenient for you. It just blows my mind how many people buy into it. It's sad to see that. But obviously, we got to get those initiatives out of school. And I think Unquire on here, who puts out a lot of really good content, he had posted a while back, because he pays attention to some of the I don't know if it was the school board. I think it was the school board, but it might have been like the city council meeting where they were talking about like removing valedictorian, salutatorian, removing class grading system ranking, because competition somehow is bad for students. And it's like, hold the phone here. I don't know what we need to do to motivate these kids, but competition is the best option I see. Like, these kids are not being challenged the way that they need to, because people are too focused on, oh, I'm sorry, do you feel bad today? We won't make you do your homework. Like, what is going on in our schools? Especially that's one from right out of Brunswick. So
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, I've seen it. They talk about it in terms of equity, right?
yeah,
We're gonna balance the scales because so and so has some sort of misfortune, or they grew up in a broken household or whatever. So we need to lift that person up. We'll give them, or maybe English isn't their first language, so we're gonna give them an extra 10 points that they didn't earn because we have to balance the scales somehow. Or here's my thing on equity: we're doing our students a big disservice when we try to teach them that in the real world life is equitable, because it's not. All right, there are haves and there are have
yeah,
nots, and that's just the way it's always been. That's the way it's always going to be. And the thing is, this is, some people are going to have to work harder to get the things in life that they want. But here's the thing: we develop character and strength, mental strength, and internal fortitude when we work harder to obtain the things that we want. And so yes, somebody might start off at a disadvantage, but I tell you what, when they're able to pull themselves up and work really hard to achieve the things that they want, they're going to appreciate that achievement so much more, and it's going to be all the sweeter, and they're going to have a real appreciation for the things that they have. Some of the most unhappy people that I've encountered are people who actually have a lot of money and everything seems to be going for, because they didn't have to work for anything. It was all just given to them, and they
yeah,
don't understand how to appreciate the value of what they have. Meanwhile, when I was deployed overseas in Afghanistan, one of the volunteer things we had in the kennel, in the canine unit over there, we had a local Afghan national who was hired to do cleaning around the building and stuff. And during his breaks, I would teach him English. And, I speaking to him, kind of broken English. He was speaking to me, but essentially, he was telling me the reason that he wants to learn English is so he can teach his children how to speak, and he wants to teach his children how to write, because knowledge is the way to advance yourself in life. And you know, I had children in Afghanistan. There's a picture in the spot that we did, where we had stopped on the roadside. We're giving toys and blankets and stuff to little kids. Now we're talking like 5, 6, 7 year olds. These kids, they weren't in school. They were out with their bare hands filling potholes in the road. One of the children, I touched his hand, and the callus on this little kid's hand was as thick as elephant skin, from just filling potholes with dirt all day. And the thing is, we came there with stuffed animals and blankets and toys and stuff. You know what they kept trying to get? They kept to grab my pen out of my pocket. They wanted a pen, these little kids. And the reason I asked, I'm like, what's up with that? And the other soldier that I was talking to, who had been out on a lot more of these missions, he said they know that pen is knowledge, that is the key to their future, and they want that more than anything. And when I came back home here to the States and I'm teaching, and I see my students passing out on their desk, or just not paying attention, trying to take out the cell phone and text, I think, my goodness, you don't know how good you have it. Where there's little kids in a part of the world who are just desperate for a pen, because that's how they advance themselves in life. But here in the States, you're just taking it all for granted. It's sad to see, but
Yeah.
so there are people, there are haves and there are have-nots, and we don't do our students any favors when we just try to equal the scales by giving to them instead of expecting them to work for it. So that's my point on equity, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, which is, I mean, obviously is a really, really good point. I mean, there's a couple of other problems with it, right? So one of the problems with equity is this, again, the idea, just to kind of break down what equity is for those who maybe aren't fully aware. Equity is this idea that equal outcomes rather than equal opportunity. So equality is what we used to talk about, which is everybody gets an equal shot. Whoever does the best from that, regardless of all these other things, I'm a fan, right? That's great. That's good. But this is about equal outcomes. So like regardless of how well somebody performs, we need to make sure that all of the races, all of the genders, all of the sexualities have an appropriate percentage based on their size in the population, whatever, at all the jobs that they want access to. And obviously the problem there is you end up having situations where you have people who are not qualified getting jobs simply to fill quotas, right? This is problematic, and it causes them a lot of times to discriminate against people, again, based on these things, rather than like the opposite. It's actually an intentionally discriminatory policy. But as you said, like this is connected with this, like what we should be teaching kids, right? We should teaching kids is that we actually believe in them. We actually believe that you can do it, and that's why we're going to be difficult on you and make you work hard, because we want you to succeed. We believe you can take it, and we want you to succeed. I remember I was an athlete. I know I don't look like it these days, but I played a lot of sports. I played a lot of sports in school, and I remember like whether it was doubles in football or whether it was this regimen we went through every single year in basketball that my high school coach called the game, which where you just did. I think we used to call them wake ups. They had another name that you're not allowed to say these days, but where you run a quarter, half, and back, three quarters, and then all the way and back. And we did like 35 of those in one practice. Like it was just maybe more, actually. It was just brutal, and we were toasted at the end of it. And then with doubles, it was the same thing. You're like basically out there, and I remember just being in so much pain to go through that. But those types of experiences, which were very, very physically challenging, were ones that gave me confidence, and like I can overcome that. I can do anything. Like, what am I afraid of, right? And so when we take that away from kids by not challenging them and not forcing them, like another thing I remember from school, just for fun, in lines of what you're saying, is I remember when I was in middle school, and it's easy to like listen to this narrative right here and think, oh, they were lying to me, but it's actually not, and I'll explain why in just a second. So in middle school, they were like really I thought that the classes were hard, right? And they were hard, and the teachers were always saying, well, we're preparing you for high school. And I got to high school, and I thought, geez, this is not as hard as middle school, right?
Yeah,
and so I went through high school, and again during high school, we're preparing you for the challenges you're going to face in college. And I was like, okay. I got to college, and it's like, oh, this is actually easier than high school. And like you could come to the conclusion that maybe I didn't need to be prepared as well, but no, it's actually the opposite. The reason it felt easier is because I had learned some skills. I'd figured out how to study and learn and do class and figure out how to get my stuff done in a timely fashion. I got more efficient. I got better at it, so that when I faced a more challenging subject and topic, yes, there's the challenge of those subjects potentially, but I had the right foundation. Now, the problem is we're robbing these kids of the appropriate foundation by not holding them accountable, by not making them figure out how they're going to handle it. It's actually very challenging. And you see this in kids when parents don't like hold their kids accountable when they're at younger ages. And then eventually they're like, oh crap, we've got to figure this out. We've got an attitude problem now. And the attitude problem was created because you didn't do the things you needed to do here. But trying to fix it here when they're older, so much more challenging. So when kids are forced, once they get out of college, because that's how the game's played right now, because college is also being easy on these kids, regardless of, aside from DEI. And when they get out into the real world, all of a sudden it's this existential crisis because they have very little of what they need in order to be able to succeed, and they've got to figure it out. And this is why you're seeing these heightened rates of anxiety and depression among this age group, is because we have not prepared them for life. It's a travesty. It's horrific. And it needs to stop. And I'm glad there are people like you that are pushing back against this and trying to run to better represent and help our kids, even though part of what you're trying to do, right, is like, well, we got to represent the people that are not being represented. Like, we also need, like, this, even though it sounds like the opposite because of the insane language of the left, where they've taken over the language and manipulated it. The reality is this is the most caring and loving thing that we can do for these kids, not coddling them, which is what I think that we do.
Absolutely. Oh my God. So that was one of the things that ultimately, my teaching mentor who I did my student teaching practicum, drove him out of Brunswick School Department. He ended up moving up to Canada, where his wife was from, because he could not stand all the hand holding and coddling and the interference from administration, we'll say. I'm glad you mentioned this accountability. So we have this incredible growth in how do I put this, with special education, and I'm not talking about students with legitimate handicaps, but I'm talking about students who just won't behave themselves. So I was a special ed kid. I come from a broken family, and my first time I got suspended was I was in second grade. I just went nutso, and I had thrown a globe at a teacher, and I attacked a couple students, and my behavior was out of control. And the thing is this, even in second grade, I knew that I was misbehaving, and I knew that I could control myself. And nowadays, right? So you fast forward to the present times, we've got all these kids now that have the ability to control themselves, but choose not to because they see all the nice little extras and benefits and freebies they get. And here's the case in point. When I'm teaching driver's ed, in my classroom, I have the straight F student sitting next to the straight A student, sitting next to the kid who's always behaving, sitting next to the kid who can't behave at all at school. But you know what? In my classroom, they all behave. It's amazing how the students who would be, we'll say, troublemakers, for lack of a better term, they are perfect angels in my classroom. And the reason why is I hold them all accountable, and I hold them all to the same standard. If I tell you that you fall asleep in my classroom, you're going to get kicked out, you got to make it up, or you use your cell phone, or you come in and you're not sober, whatever, I'm kicking you out. All right, you got to make up the class, whatever. And the word is out about Mr. Hogan when it comes to driver's ed. Don't fall asleep in his class. He actually means it when he said, because I've had kids who, you said that, but you didn't actually mean it. Oh yeah, I mean it. Get out. You set the standard and you hold people to it. I had a student so here in Brunswick, we had a school called the Real School, and this was for the students whose behavior was so bad they could not be in the regular buildings with the other students. So they put them in this other building called the Real School. I was teaching one of these students who supposedly was a really bad behavior issue. Perfect angel while she was working with me, and I was talking to her. I said, what do you all do there at the Real School, right? Oh, well, we have knitting, and we'll take nature walks, and sometimes we have field trips to Burger, because the Real School is over on Brunswick Landing, the old Navy base. And I'm like, yeah, but how about academics? Well, there's a little of that, but it's not so much that. And she was totally gaming the system during COVID. The teachers, the cheating was so rampant, and I would have my students talking to me about it like it was not a big deal. Oh yeah, I was taking a spelling quiz and I had my answers right there. And I actually brought my concern up to the school board about this. I'm like, I have my students telling me outright, bragging about the fact that they're cheating. What checks and balances do your teachers have in place? Oh, well, you'd have to take that up with their individual teacher. It's like, wait a second, you're the school board.
Yeah.
Where's your oversight?
Well, does the school board actually know what they're supposed to be doing? Do they know their role? Do they know where they stand in authority?
Here in Brunswick, it's You know what? Here's the way I look at it: is this the school board had a direction that they wanted to chart. They wanted to embrace DEI and everything that comes with it, and they went out and they hired a superintendent, the captain of the ship, and they said, "This is the direction we want to go. Skipper, take us there." And basically, they've been kind of on autopilot while our current superintendent takes them to where the school board wanted to go. Um, it's madness. It's absolute madness here. And by and large, our school board, every member votes in lockstep, so they're all in agreement all the time. They actually built our strategic plan, and this drives me. Talk about fiscal responsibility. We are a top heavy administration. We got a pre-K instructional strategist. Who needs that,
What?
right?
What?
Get your
I
pre-K
mean,
teachers together.
they're not teaching anything anyway. What's the strategy? Continue not teaching?
Right.
Like they bring in the blankets to
I
so the kids can take a nap
have
when they're
nap
a little
time.
too stressed. Like
Yeah.
what do they do? What do they? I mean, given what's going on in our education system, what could they possibly be doing?
We have a chief academic officer in addition to an assistant superintendent. You'd think one of them could fill in
Chief,
as the pre-K instructionalist or whatever.
chief academic officer?
We have a chief academic officer here I think
What
the
what
chief
what do
is
they
the number
do?
3 person in the school department.
Why do they need a number three? Again, what educate like this is the problem that one of the we talk about administration being one of the biggest problems because I ran in 2022 and 2024 actually, but 2024 I did a lot of I decided I was going to write a little article and I was going to do a little research into like what really is what's needed to help improve the education system. And one of the things that I would say is it's parents. It's actually the biggest answer is parents. Parents need to be engaged and involved. That is actually the number one single most significant factor in the success or
Completely
failure of
agree.
a child is the parents. And if the parents got involved and they showed up to school board meetings and they said, "Hey, this is stupid," the school board would listen eventually. If enough of them showed up, that's actually what happens. They do cave to pressure when parents stand up and do that. Unfortunately, the parents on the right side of the aisle are afraid to stand up and speak up in places like Portland, places like Brunswick that are super liberal, but that's what's actually necessary. But one of the other factors that I discovered when I was looking into that is that Maine ranks like about somewhere in the mid 30s. I've heard some reports low 40s as low as, but we'll go with like 36, somewhere around there because there's a range depending on which report you're writing. So we'll say it's like around 36, 38 in the country in education. Although again, most recent reports are in the 40s, but and we pay our
Going the wrong way.
teachers the 36th or 38th most in the nation, but we spend the ninth most per student in the country, somewhere around $20,000 a year per student. If you look at the entire state, right? So we spend the ninth most, we pay our teachers the 36th most. Where's the problem? Maybe it's a little bit in administration and some of these other, like you kind of talk about the guidance, not the guidance counselors, but
Social workers
the social
globally.
workers and some of these other I think you mentioned like the idea of gaming the system. How many of these kids are in special ed but don't need to be in special ed? Like they just need parents to but it's a combination of parents and they need to make sure that kids aren't gaming the system and all these
A
other
little,
things
a little tough love.
so that we could actually pay the teachers.
Yeah.
Because that's actually I'm okay with paying the teachers. We just need to make sure that the teachers are not indoctrinating kids and that they're actually teaching.
Yeah, well, we've got some of that. We've got a problem with that in Brunswick as well. Um, gosh, just before the November election, there was a student in Brunswick High School who took a picture of a blackboard where their teacher had basically written out on the board liberals, conservatives, and they did like all under the liberal column it was all happy stuff, and under the conservative column it said like racists, doesn't, just it was
Racist,
absurd.
misogynist, and
The whole gamut, I mean, but
bigots. Yeah.
the parent actually, the kid texted the picture to their parent, and the parent wrote back, was this like um, an activity where the teacher solicited the kids for ideas, or did the teacher write it all? And the kid's like, no, this was all the teacher. There was a picture I just saw the other day. So in Brunswick, here's a new administrative position that we have called Dean of Students. Didn't need it. The super at the board meeting where this position was proposed, the assistant superintendent straight up said, the duties that we envision this person fulfilling, they're already kind of being fulfilled by other people in the school department, whether it's the school resource officer, the guidance counselor, or whatever. But we want to roll it all under one roof, and we're going to call it a dean of students. Well, I saw a picture the other day where the dean of students has like a sticker or something on their door. It says something like "trans student safe space" or something like that. Now, here I want to be very clear about this. Every student deserves dignity and respect and should be treated, the golden rule, right? Treat other people the
Yeah,
way you
yeah.
want to be treated. Here's what I don't like. Singling out any one student over any other student. Kind of goes like back to the Black Lives Matter. All lives matter. We don't pick winners and losers, but under DEI, they do pick winners and losers.
Well,
So
it's
I
because
think,
I mean,
yeah,
DEI is obviously a Marxist ideology, right?
absolutely.
Marxist ideology has to pin the oppressed and the oppressor, and we've got to overthrow the oppressor, which basically is straight white men in
Right.
particular, but all of those categories, especially Christian. And so, like anybody who falls into another category, we've got to support them in their battle against the evil people, which apparently I am, which I didn't even know. I wish I knew what I was doing that was so evil, but anyway, that's a
Well,
whole nother story.
kind of playing off of that though is, so we've got this big national debate that my opponent doesn't even want to even talk about. Doesn't even want to talk about this debate.
Well, you probably because talking about it is harmful to people.
Oh, it's going to hurt somebody's feelings, no doubt. Um,
Yeah.
that's another thing too, right? Um, some people would think that I'm kind of callous. All right, I'm not. I'm not. I can actually be a very sensitive person, but having been in the service and having been to some pretty rotten places in this world. I mean, I've been all over the Middle East. I spent almost 7 years of my life serving in the Middle East, whether it's Iraq, Afghanistan, wherever. Okay. I've been over there and I've done that, and it's a roof. I mean, I had, when I was serving in Baghdad at the time, before anybody back home knew about ISIS, they were miles outside the city, and we were scrambling, getting ready to evacuate the embassy. It was that bad. So I've seen a very ugly side of this world and an ugly side of humanity. And so sometimes, you know what, our kids need to get a thicker skin. They got to toughen up a little bit. Here in America, we just coddle our kids like this is the most, happy, and we don't want our students to be scared of the world around them. We don't want that, but there's a line, and we seem to have just lost all sense of where that line is. And sometimes, you know what, parents need to be a parent and not their kid's friend, and teachers need to be teachers, right? And not, oh, I don't know even what they are nowadays. Like they're so, here's I'll say this about teachers, having been a long time teacher myself. The students should get to the end of their school year and not have any clue where on the political spectrum their educator stands, right? If a student can get from day one to the last day of class in June, and they don't know if their educator was liberal, conservative, Republican, Democrat, whatever, they have no clue, right? The teachers kept their bias out of the classroom entirely, then that teacher has done their job successfully. But if you can identify where that teacher lies on the political spectrum, then they haven't done their job well enough, because the teacher's bias has no place in the classroom. Here's what I say about this. Again, being as a longtime educator. As an educator, my job isn't to tell the student what to think, it's to teach them how to think for themselves.
Yeah, no, I mean that's what we should be doing, but instead we're focused. We're trying to turn this whole system into an into indoctrination. And so you were mentioning though, and maybe I missed it, but like, and I kind of distracted you, I think, a little bit on the issue that you said your opponent was afraid to talk about.
Yeah, she does not want to talk about biological males playing in girls' sports, and this kind of went back to my thing about the trans safe space on the dean of students door. What if so in Brunswick, we don't actually, to the best of my knowledge, have this issue in Brunswick where we have a biological male participating in girls' sports. However, we have policies in place that would permit it should that occur. Here's my concern. What about that female on the girls' team who has a biological male playing on their team? Are they going to feel comfortable going to that dean of students office, knowing that the dean of students is partial to the trans students? That right? I mean,
Right.
that dean of students should be there for everybody. Honestly, I don't even know that we need this dean of students position. Like I
Sounds
said,
like you guys have a bunch of positions that don't need to exist. It
way
sounds
too
like,
many.
you know.
I railed about this for years. So for years, the assistant superintendent and chief academic officer, they answered their own telephone. But a couple of years ago during COVID, when we had all the COVID money, so this funny thing about the COVID, when COVID happened, we got all sorts of new admin positions here in Brunswick because, well, the federal government was paying for it. But you know what? After the federal government money went away, we were just going to kind of grandfather that in. And that's exactly what they did. They hired a bunch of admin people. And so here's the thing is personnel is your biggest expense.
Yeah.
Most of the personnel positions they got were in the admin, especially special ed department, but not entirely. All right. We got all these. So all of a sudden, the assistant superintendent can't answer his own phone. He needs an administrative assistant. But yeah, going back to here's my thing on this. I've had people accuse me of being a bigot. It's the most absurd, ridiculous thing in the world. My best friend is bisexual, I mean, I share all sorts of stuff, but I'm not bigoted at all. What I believe in is fair competition, and I don't believe that the female athletes should be discriminated against the way they have been by forcing them to compete against biological males who ultimately, I mean, it's obvious, it's common sense. The boys have more muscular tone, a larger, breathing capacity. It's all been hashed out already.
There's so much science. It's just an unarguable fact.
It's not an anti-trans position. It's a pro-female. It's pro-fairness, right? It's funny.
The problem is, and just because I feel like I want to highlight this every time this comes up, the problem is on the other side of the aisle is that if you don't agree with somebody who thinks they're a woman, a man who thinks he's a woman, for instance, if you don't agree with him 100%, then you're at risk of him committing suicide. Like, and you have to go all the way. This is their ideology. This is why they can't back down, because that would be, as they call it, erasing that person. It would be saying that they don't exist. And so it's so obvious to the rest of us that even if you believe that people can be a different gender than their physical sex, which, gender was a construct that was created after I was in school. I think maybe later in high school, early college, I started to hear about the term gender. Up until then, it was any form I filled out. It was just sex. Right. Yeah. And so they created it, but this idea that you could be a different gender than your physical sex, or that you could, as some of them are trying to say, change your sex, I think is absurd to begin with. But even if you believe that, you look, the reality of the competitive disadvantage that you're putting biological women at is obvious to anybody who's paying attention. And some of them even understand that and agree, but it's this aspect of the ideology is that this would lead, even though that data does not suggest that this leads to higher suicidal ideation, that it's not there. That's what they've bought. That's what they're trying to sell. They're so ideologically captured that but I agree with you that it's, we have to protect our girls.
What I find, again, we mentioned earlier, only when it's convenient for their narrative. When Bruce Jenner became Caitlyn Jenner, right, the most high-profile trans athlete in the country, former Olympic athlete, back when Bruce became Caitlyn, he was the absolute darling of the liberal trans community. But then Caitlyn Jenner comes out and says, "This isn't fair. Biological males playing with females," and you don't hear about what Caitlyn Jenner thinks anymore because it doesn't fit the narrative that they like. Right now, this highest profile trans athlete out there is persona non grata.
Yeah.
It's it's
Well,
ridiculous.
I mean, that's how these people operate. I mean, J.K. Rowling is another great example of somebody who was a darling of the left.
Yep.
One of her main characters in her book, like probably the character that people loved the most, turns out it was gay, and then she says, but no, women are women. This is a fact. And boom, she is hated. And in fact, I stopped watching a TV show. I try not to do this type of stuff, but they were just laying it on so thick. Like I'll let a little bit of wokeism go, right? You change characters from being men to women from an old book that I really really like. You make them people of color. I don't care so much. I'll keep
Yeah.
watching, right? I don't necessarily love it. I think it's because I know that you're doing it because you're woke. But if the storyline is good, I'll keep watching. But if you just keep bashing
Except with
on
James
anything that,
Bond, they can't make James Bond a female.
we'll see. Who knows what they're going to try to do? But I've heard some of that. But anyway, so, but yeah, they just were bashing and calling J.K. Rowling a bigot. And it's just like, are we serious here? Are we serious? But
That,
anyway,
no,
it's wild.
during COVID, all we heard was, follow the science, follow the science. Listen, you can believe whatever you want to believe about yourself. Okay. If you want to believe, if you're a biological male, but you feel that you're a woman trapped in a man's body, you can believe that, but it doesn't change the fact that you still have a man's body. It is what it is. But, and it to me, it just boggles the mind that this is even a conversation. But to bring it all back, it's a conversation worth having that my opponent doesn't even want to touch. Because, and here's the thing that drives me crazy, right? My opponent, from the pictures I've seen, appears to have daughters, and she's a female. You would think that she would be in support of women, but I don't get that sense. And I honestly think she probably is, but to admit as much would totally throw her supporters for a loop. So we're
Right.
not going to touch that.
Well, right. I mean, that's yeah. It's interesting. Just recently, I think in the Judiciary Committee, we had one Democrat, O'Halloran, I think, join our side and vote in favor of at least one of the bills. I think I'm guessing it's 868, which is one that would protect women's sports and spaces, proposed by Representative Liz Caruso. And so one joined our side, but that makes it a 6-6, and I don't know what that means yet, but it looks like it's
Give it time; they'll cancel her
there,
and won't re-vote for her.
there's a good chance that it'll escape committee and it'll be voted on the floor. But I think it's still highly unlikely that the Democrat controlled House and Senate both vote in our direction. There are some people who should, like if you're in Mike Tipping's district, make sure to let him know. He just barely won. He's in the Senate. He barely won, a couple hundred votes in a senatorial election. Is very close race. And there's some others like that, like Tim Nangle down here in my area. But anyway, like it's going to be interesting to see what happens because it's so obvious, and this is an opportunity. I mean, if the Democrats want to have any chance of winning in 2026, some of them will step out of line, but I don't think enough will. I think they're going to try to hold them, hold them and threaten them like they typically do on that side. But either way, so.
Yeah.
One of the things I was curious, I don't know if this is something you want to talk about at this point, but there was some interesting stuff that happened related to your lawn signs. Is that are we going to wait to have that conversation later?
No, we could have that conversation. Yeah, so the number is up to about 20% of all of my campaign yard signs have now been stolen, or tampered with, or defaced. I have caught at least 2 individuals who actually had them inside of their car. Charges have been pressed against both of these individuals, both Brunswick residents, one of them a Brunswick School Department employee, unbelievably. Wow. So, right, that's pretty brazen when you work for the school department and you steal and destroy a school department school board candidate's sign. But yeah, it's I tell you what, for a very tolerant population, right? Because here in Brunswick we're predominantly liberal. Okay,
Yep.
for so in the liberals, right, the progressives, they consider themselves the party of peace, love, kindness, and tolerance. And it's funny because that one person actually had a peace, love, and kindness yard sign of her own right outside her house. They seem to be very intolerant. All right. Here's my thing. If you don't like my platform, if you don't like my ideas, don't vote for me. But why are you going to mess with my property? So that's what we've got going on here in Brunswick. And
Well, and to be fair, like, so I think like sometimes lawn signs do just disappear, right? Like, and I think the weather, this stuff, because I know, like, it was kind of funny. And I don't know what other people in town do, but when I ran, I saw my opponent posted a video showing that some of her lawn signs had disappeared and making comments about that this is illegal and you shouldn't do this. And I don't know, it almost felt like she was insinuating that me and my people went and stole the lawn signs. And I'm like, I don't care. You can put up a lawn sign. Like, she actually put up a lawn sign in a place that she was not allowed to put it up.
yeah,
In because it wasn't a public space, it was actually in my condo association, the entry to the condo association. There was a place that she plopped one, knowing, I think it was one of those things, knowing that I was there, and it was
yeah.
just kind of a little dig potentially. I don't know. That's what I assume. I make some assumptions. I may be wrong. I didn't even take that down. I didn't even complain about it. Eventually, our condo association is like, no, you can't have that there, and they got rid of it. But I'm not taking anybody's signs down. But I do think that when my signs disappear, sometimes it's like, oh, I think somebody might have done something with them, and I think sometimes that's true. But I do think at the same time that weather does play a pattern. But in your situation, you actually have a way that you've been able to prove that people have stolen them.
I have. And seeing as we're getting to the end of the campaign, I don't mind sharing at this point. Places where I found signs were stolen previously because they seem to be a hot spot, or maybe it's the same person going back. I stuck a tile tracker inside of my signs. I've got multiple signs that actually have a tracking device in them. And it's funny, this one person um, who stole one of the signs and ultimately destroyed it. Threw it into her car, and then later in the day gave the car to her daughter, who drove around with my property inside of it. I was able to track it. Well, when the police officer went to talk to her, she wanted the officer to press charges against me for tracking her daughter, which was so absurd and so ridiculous, seeing as I wasn't trying to track her daughter. I was just trying to follow my property around and get it back. But this is the level of absurdity that that they are at. It's madness. You all you can do is laugh. All you can do is laugh.
Yeah.
So yeah, but
Yeah.
I
The
you
party
know,
of peace and tolerance
intolerance.
and kindness and all the other kind of stuff, as long as you agree with their orthodoxy.
And I have to say this as well. Yeah, as long as you agree with them. If you don't agree with them, all bets are off. Even though there are no reports that I'm aware of that any of my opponent's signs have been tampered with at all. Right? I mean, I've had people like spray paint my signs and all
Oh yeah,
sorts of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
oh yeah,
yeah,
right. I found them in
yeah.
dumpsters. Actually, I've there have been people purposely taking my signs, uprooting them, and putting them on town property. Um, so I
To
had to go and
to
remedy
try and
that.
get you in trouble.
Yes.
Oh
And,
my
and it's
gosh.
funny too, because one of them, so I made sure our local police department
This
was
is to
aware of.
defend democracy, I think. This is what they say, right?
Yeah,
We're
yeah, I
going to
guess.
tamper with democracy in order to protect democracy.
Right. That's exactly what's happening. I one of one of the police officers. So the police department has been on the lookout for people tampering with my signs. One of the officer, so somebody had taken one of my signs and placed it on town property. I'm driving by and I saw this. I parked, I pulled over. I'm getting out of my car and pulling up this sign that should not be on town property. One of the police officers coming by, he got all excited. He thought, "Oh, I found the guy who's stealing the signs." Right? He gets out. He's kind of looking at me, and he's like, "Wait a second, you're the candidate." I'm like, "Yeah, somebody put my sign on town property, and I'm removing it." So, um, I mean, this is the kind of games and shenanigans that are going on here in Brunswick.
Just it
And
seems to be like mental illness. Like it's like that's what it feels like. But like anyway. Well, so I want to have some fun right now,
yeah,
and we'll I'm sure we'll talk about a couple other things, but and show people this ad that we made. It's really great. So your
yeah,
ad.
let's do
So
it.
we're
I'm
ready.
asking for your
We're
vote.
gonna play the ad.
Oh. Hello, I'm Hulk Hogan, and I want your vote.
All right. Well,
outtake.
obviously that's not the real ad. That's a fun little outtake. There's another one I sent you that I don't think you should use, but it's pretty funny.
All right.
All right. So here's the real ad. So we'll show this is what we shot, and I acquired some new video editing skills, and we made a nice ad for you. So we're gonna go ahead and show that. Let me go back over there.
Hi, I'm Shaun Hogan, proud military veteran and candidate for our Brunswick School Board. Election Day is June 10th at the Brunswick Junior High School campus from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. I am asking for your vote, and due to recent events, your decision is critical for our students' future. When the Brunswick School Department flew our American flag upside down in the Crooker Theater, I and many others, it shocked our conscience. Flying our flag in distress, in the presence of our youth and their families, without cause, is an indictment on leadership. It is an insult to the generations of veterans and patriots who sacrificed so much for this town, state, and nation. As a veteran, I know how it feels to serve and sacrifice. We deeply care about our community. We don't ask for much, just simple respect. Respect for our neighbors, respect for our flag, and to make decisions keeping in mind all of Brunswick's residents. Maine state law requires schools to teach students the sacrifices of our founders and all those who have defended our freedom. This ugly sight of an upside-down flag proves this is not being prioritized by our current school board. I'm running because our district leadership needs fair and balanced viewpoints. What should be our focus? Our students' academic success, their security, and we must pass along an appreciation for our veterans and the sacrifices they have made to ensure the freedom all Americans enjoy. As your school board member, I will introduce a patriotic observances policy to bring Brunswick back into compliance with Maine law. It will restore proper respect for the flag, re-engage our veteran community, and ensure every student learns the meaning of sacrifice and civic duty. I wore the uniform to serve our nation. Now I'm asking for your vote to serve our community. I will make sure our students and community come first, not personal, ideological, or political agendas. So on June 10th at the Brunswick Junior High School from 7 a.m. till 8 p.m., I am asking for you to vote Hogan for school board.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, it looks good.
Well, again, a fantastic job with the video. Alan, I think, did the script. Outstanding.
Yeah,
The
Alan
hardest part of the whole thing was trying to smile in that one where I was talking about the model policy. You can see I naturally smile, but when you're trying to smile, it's hard to not look cheesy.
Well, there is that, but it's also like when you're doing something serious, you're like, oh, I'm running for like when I've made videos for my campaign and stuff like that, and it's really hard because you're like, I want to focus on what I need to do, right? And so when I'm focused on business, I'm not like, I'm like, I got to get something done, right? And so I think it's really challenging when you're making videos like that to smile, So it's yeah, like I said, it's a challenge.
I could be a very people who know me. I could be very friendly and outgoing, and in my circle, in my group of people. But my wife tells me like when I'm out in town, like smile a little, loosen up, because usually I got the military thing, and the poor lady at the deli slicing the meat, and like the customer in front of me, and I have this look on my face like, slice faster, because I'm waiting, you know. So my wife is like, you're scaring people, you know, lighten up a little bit. So it's, you know, what are you gonna do? But yeah, awesome video.
Yeah, well, it was fun. It's the first time I've ever done that, but yeah, it was. I think we had a lot of fun, despite the fact that it was like a rainy, drizzly day.
You couldn't even tell it was raining in some of those shots.
Yeah.
Well, all of them,
You could tell it was like overcast. Like you could tell the sun wasn't shining, but that's about it. So no, I thought it went well, and like I said, it was a lot of fun. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to assist, and thank you for stepping up and running for school board. I think these are crazy times, and places like Brunswick are some of the more challenging places to put your name out there. And you deal with, despite, again, the party of love is really great at hating, just kind of like hating anybody who doesn't agree with them. And so stepping up into such a volatile place in our society right now, which is the school board, is something that we need more people to do. We need to stand up, we need to speak up, and we need to let people know that what's happening right now is not okay. And a lot, I think people just are still unaware of the Marxism. They're unaware of what actually, like, because the Democrats use really crafty language, and most people don't do research, right? Socio-emotional learning, for instance, which is really how they sneak in their Marxist ideology, and how they don't teach kids how to actually cope. Supposedly this is helping kids cope, and in reality it's like the exact opposite.
Well, now we can't say DEI anymore. Now we have to say belonging. That's the new code word that they're using for DEI.
I heard somebody called it, I think it was a Bangor school, said diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And I think it's just shifted to belonging. There was a Portland school board meeting. I don't know if it's the school board, it was Portland budget meeting, where somebody's like, so I know that we're not supposed to use the words DEI anymore, but how are we making sure that we're still prioritizing that? Yeah. So, yeah, they don't. I mean, they're going to continue doing it. They're just, so many people are ideologically captured. Like, it's like, if you were, again, the way that they're presenting it is, if you're a decent human being, you are on board with this type of stuff. And if you're not a decent human being, that's the only reason you're against it. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges we face, is all of the hate that we receive just by simply asking questions and speaking truth. And it's crazy to me that we're in this place.
I think that's why people don't step forward a lot, is because it's like, is it worth it to just put my neck out there and offer a different path forward? I mean, really, that's all I'm saying is can we consider going in a different direction? And here's why. And just doing that alone, you're getting slings and arrows and everything. It's madness. And a lot of people are like, why am I going to put myself out there? Here in Brunswick, we just haven't been fleeced enough. With the taxes going up like crazy, I guess we just haven't met our pain threshold in this community, because my opponent has straight up said she's all for the status quo and doing exactly what they're doing now. I'm not okay with that, but it seems like the residents here in this community, unless I win, they're okay with that, and that's just sad.
Well, it's a combination of things. And I'm not saying this to make people feel bad, but maybe to hopefully awaken them. It's cowardice, right? Yeah. It's people not standing up for what is true and allowing this insane ideology to advance and destroy children and destroy people for fear that you might lose your job. I'm like, there's some things, I get it. People have families, they get things they got to do. I'm not knocking that. And I understand that that's a reality. But if you're working for a company that you're afraid of losing your job if you stand up and speak truth, maybe you should consider what company you're working for and try to find a place where you don't have to worry about that, where you can speak up and still, have your job. As well as, but actually not as well as, but we need more people to speak up. We need people to stop being cowards, I think. But there's another piece to it, right? There's a hopelessness, right? And I think there's a lot of people, especially if you're in places like Portland, you're in places like Brunswick, is like, what's the point? Like, oh, I go and I speak up and nobody's going to hear me. So, well, maybe, but they're definitely not going to hear you if you don't speak up. And I think if we want to believe, like, why would we want to live in a world with no hope? We have to, if for us to be able to have hope, we have to stand up. We need more people stepping up, speaking up, getting involved. And with that, then I think I believe we do have hope. But if we continue to sit idly by, then we don't have any hope. It is on us. We have a choice here in Maine. We have a choice in places like Brunswick. We can seed these places and just say lost cause, and they'll become a lost cause. Or we can say, you know what? We have truth on our side and we just need to keep speaking it. If lies can win by being spoken over and over and over again, what do you think the truth can do? The truth is powerful, and it will win the day if it is spoken, if we keep speaking it. But another thing that factors into this is, like, so there's hopelessness, there's cowardice, and then there's people who are like, well, I don't have kids in the system.
Yeah.
Right? They're like, well, I homeschool. It's like, right. Okay. You homeschool, but do you care about your society? Do you care about the world that your kids are going to grow up in? Do you care about, like, so it's like, great. I'm glad that you homeschool. I think it's great for parents to be really involved in their children's education. But like, that doesn't, it actually puts you in a position where you're uniquely qualified actually to be, if you're homeschooling your own kids, then you know how to teach kids. And you know what principles are good, and you can give to our society either by being a school board member or by helping support school board members who are actually going to enact the right policy and right the ship and help remind the world that actually the superintendent is under the leadership, and as is the entire school system. Really, the superintendent works for the school board, and then he or she oversees the entire district. But that ultimately, all of those people work for the people, not the other.
Nice to remember that, though.
Yeah. Yeah, well, they struggle with that. Drummond and Woodsum has convinced them that that they just are supposed to rubber stamp whatever the superintendent puts in front of them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Drummond and Woodsum. I mean, they've you see these public comment sessions all over the state where if they've got Drummond and Woodsum as their lawyer, they won't even. I mean, you can go before public comment and say, Mr. Superintendent or school board, what is our current student population? And the chair of the board will say, this is a time for us to listen to you. We don't answer questions because they've been advised not to. It's the most absurd thing, where here it is, you have a moment where you could directly interact with the people that you are representing. And listen, if somebody asks a question from the podium that a school board or the superintendent doesn't have an immediate answer to, or you don't want to put out incorrect information, hey, let me get your contact information. I'll get back to you with an answer. But if it's something that's like super obvious and whatever, answer the person. You're serving the town, the taxpayer, the resident of the town. But I feel like when you get behind the podium, because I've done it plenty of times, and you're speaking to these people, it's almost like they're listening out of an obligation, but they're not even listening. They're busy texting on their phone or whatever. And heaven forbid they actually answer you with a response. It's absurd. And I find it's especially the school departments that have Drummond Woodsum as their lawyer advising them poorly.
Yep. As they do. So, all right. Well, thanks for taking the time to come on. And again, thanks for running. I'm sure we have plenty of more things that we talked for quite a while the other day. I'm sure we could keep going, but ultimately I appreciate that you're running, and thank you for serving our country as well. And being willing to step up and do a difficult thing and run in a place where it's behind enemy lines, so to speak. One of the things for everybody at home, we need more people to get involved. We need more people to step up, to run for school board, to contribute financially and help people who are running for school board, volunteer, whatever services you have. We need people to be involved. This is how we win. This is how we win back our state. This is how we do it, is by speaking the truth, getting involved. One of the things that you can do as well is we're going to have shorts from this video. You can share those shorts. You can, with people as you're having conversations, and if people are like, oh, the people don't steal signs. Well, we've got some proof. We can share that with you. Look at this video of this guy. You get some pictures. I actually have a short video that I posted to X a while back of somebody had put a recorder near some Trump signs in the weeks leading up to the 2024 election, and somebody literally mowed down and ran over 4 of them, but it was on video with license plates. So that I think that didn't work out so well for them, but and there was a bunch of other stuff like that. So we know these things are happening. But anyway, the reality is, we need people to get involved. And that's one of the things you can do: like, share, subscribe. Another thing you can do to support the podcast, we've got this great merch. Look at this great hat I'm wearing. We've got this is more of a polo. This is more for me, but there's a lot of other gear, mugs, travel mugs, different things like that. If you want to support the podcast, because this isn't free to do, but I don't make any money. And if you can help me lose less money so we can continue to bring you this content, that would be great. There's a QR code at the top right, and that's one of the ways you can go. You can also get there from my X page, and coming soon is going to be the Muddy Waters website. So get ready for that, and you'll be able to easily access it by just going straight to our website, and you'll also be able to see all the podcasts and whatnot there, on top of many other things. So thank you all for watching, and we will see you back here probably. I think it's next week is going to be the next podcast. I don't think we've got anything else going on this week, although I do have a special that's going to be coming out at some point. I'm not really sure when. I went and followed around the Portland street preacher. I've got some video content from some of the conversations that he had with some people, as well as conversation I had with him, and be on the lookout, because that may be coming out sometime in the next couple of days. So, just keep on fighting the good fight, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.